Okay, welcome to this Python session. We're going to look at kind of getting going with some Python and some basic instructions. So open up the shell window again, and we're going to go for a new file, run a script. So here's our new Python editor window. Just make sure I've got decent size text, 16, yeah, so you should all be able to see that. Excellent. So let's get going. First of all, we obviously want to get Python to be able to output commands that we can see and output information. So for that we use the print function. We know this is a function because it's got parentheses after it, and open and close. So anything which is a command like this followed by parentheses is a function in Python. We don't know how print works, we don't care, it's a built-in function, and obviously whatever we put in these parentheses is going to be printed. So we'll start with the obligatory hello world program. So if we want to print text or a string, then we put it inside quotes. Let's just run this. Source must be saved. I'm just going to save it on the desktop. I'm going to call it hello world. I already had a file because I've been messing about it before, and there we go, it's put us back into the shell window, and it's obviously run and print a hello world, so no great surprises there apart from I misspelled world. So put my L in there, and that looks okay. So if I just run it again, make sure everything is all right. Now it didn't run that time, it gave me a syntax error. You'll notice that the shell prompt, nothing's actually happened, so it's not actually run any of our code. It's giving me a syntax error, and those sharp-eyed amongst you may notice I actually sneaked in an extra bracket there as an error. So this is a syntax error. What it's meant is that the structure of what we've written doesn't make sense to the shell, and the shell doesn't know what to do with this because there's an additional bracket there, and it's highlighted the error for us in orangey red colour there, or salmon pink depending on your eyes, and we can delete it. The errors normally are quite close to where that is. In this case it was actually spot on. Sometimes it can be the line above as well. So let's double check that works. No idea what happened then. Run module. There we go, hello world, so it's run. Brilliant. So the next thing we want to do is be able to get our computer to take some input from us as the user of the program into the computer, and it should become no surprise to you that again we use a function for that. So we've got the input function here. Now the input function, when we call it, prompts the user to type something in. We get a flashing cursor at the screen, and we can type in what we want, and we hit enter, and whatever we type in is then returned by this function as a string. That's quite important, and you'll see problems that causes us later on. So this function, as we call it now, will return the value, whatever we've typed in, but we're not doing anything with it. What we need to do now is assign it to a variable. So, well, really we ought to tell the user what we want them to do. So maybe we have to ask them a question first. Print what is your name? And we'll do first name initially. So you'll notice that here I've used single quotes rather than double. Does it matter? No is the answer, providing whatever you start with you end with. If I've started with double quotes, I end with double quotes, and I can then use a single quote within my text just as a normal character. If I've started with single, I must end with single, and I can use double quotes within my text. So I'm going to ask what's your name. We're going to prompt you to type it in, and we're going to assign that to a variable called fname. So just looking at the syntax of this command, I'm sure some of you have seen it before, but you might not have thought about what's going on. We're calling a function called input. Input gets us to type stuff in from the keyboard. Whatever we type in is returned to this point in the code where the input command is called from, and that becomes part of an assignment statement. Remember, equals is not an equal sign but an assignment, and it assigns whatever we type in into a variable called fname. Now what's a variable? A variable is just a container. It's a container with a label on it, fname, and we can put anything in there that we want. And obviously after doing that, I suppose we might ask people what their second name is as well. So I'm just going to cheat to make life easy. Great thing about editors is I can do a cut and paste and I can say what's your second name, and we're going to input that into a variable called sname. So let's see if our code works. So hello world, what's your first name? Now you'll notice the cursor's not flashing. It's because the shell window isn't in focus. It's got nothing to do with Python, it's Windows. We're still in the editor window, so I've got to click in the shell window. It's now in focus. Now I've got my cursor and I can put in my name. What's my second name? So I'm now Fred Jones and hit return, and oh okay, so the shell kind of just returned. Well, that's all we asked it to do. We've just created the variables from the input statements, but we didn't go on and do anything with them, fname and sname. So presumably it would be nice that I kind of welcomed you now. So I might say something like print welcome. So welcome is a string, so I need to put it in quotes. And then I want to print your first name, fname, and I want to do your surname, sname. Now you'll notice the print statement now has got multiple commands in, multiple arguments in. We've got a string argument here, we've got a variable fname and a variable sname. When we're printing multiple things with the print command, we put commas between them. Okay, so this should say welcome, whatever our name is, hopefully. Let's just run that. So here we go, we're Fred Jones, and welcome Fred Jones. Brilliant, that seemed to work. Notice, by the way, that there's a space in here. We didn't ask it to print spaces, but Python's really nice, because when we print separate things within a print statement like this, it assumes that we want a space between them, so it puts them in automatically. Whilst we did put our names in separately, really our overall name is a combination of our first name and surname, and rather than mess around with two variables, what we might want to do is create a new variable called just name, which will be our overall name. And what do we want name to equal? We want it to be our first name followed by our surname. That would seem reasonable. So remember, this is an assignment statement, this is first name, surname, and we're going to take these two and put them into the variable name. So when I do this print statement here, it's just going to do name. So let's run that and see what happens. So what's my first name is John. My surname is Doe. Welcome, oh dear, what's going on here? Welcome, it's printed parentheses, it's printed quotes, it's printed the comma. That's not kind of what we expected at all. Well, it's because what we've done here is we've actually taken these two variables here, and by putting a comma between them in this structure, we've created something called a list. And in fact, it's a special kind of list called a tuple. Don't worry about all that for now. Basically, we've created a new structure here containing two separate variables, fname and sname. It's not what I wanted really. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take the text in fname, the text in sname, and I wanted to add them together to create my new variable name. What I actually needed to do was what's called concatenation, the addition of two strings. And Python's quite neat for that, because if you want to add two strings together using concatenation, you just use the add sign. Now, you don't need the spaces in there, but I think it makes it clearer. So let's just run that again. Shell up so you can see it. So what's our first name? I'll go back to being Fred. Our surname is Jones. And welcome Fred. Oh, Fred Jones. Well, obviously, what has it done? It's taken our Fred and our Jones and it's concatenated them together. But we didn't ask it to leave a space, and in this case, it's done exactly what we told it and just pushed them together. So if I actually want a space in there, then obviously I need to add a space in as well. So that will work. We'll come back on to looking at that one in a minute, and you'll convince yourself that that worked and put our space in there. So that's quite good. So we've got, excuse me, we've got our name in. That's kind of going quite well. Let's find out how old somebody is. So we'll ask the question again. Actually, we're going to do it a different way this time. What we're going to do is we're going to use the input function. Now you notice it's got parentheses after it. We've not been putting anything in there. Generally, when you are prompting the user for input, you generally would ask them the question beforehand to tell them what you want them to type in. Obviously, the people that wrote Python thought about that and they thought, well, you know what, in the input function, we'll give you the option of passing a single string, remember it's only one string here, in, and we'll display that as text within the actual input function. So we can do how old are you in here like that. And obviously we want to get how old you are, and we want to put it into a variable called age. So the input function now should do that, and we'll just check that it works because we're going to print something like you are. We don't need the space here because it puts it in for us automatically. Okay, so let's run that. So first name ABC, surname DEF. Welcome ABCDF. Notice now it's put the space in here because we created that new string called name with a space in. How old are you? Now notice the prompt is straight after the word you. This is the way it works when we put the text with the input function, whereas you would have noticed up here the input function came on the next line. So we probably need a little space there within our question. So magically I am 21 today and you are 21. Okay, so that worked. Just remember that little space there where the U is. So what we need to do is put a little space there to get rid of that. Okay, pretty straightforward. So welcome name, how old are you, you are age. What we want to do is do something like, I don't know, let's work out how old they're, how many years they've got until they're 100 years old. So obviously we need to do some maths here. So if you were 40 years old, then 100 minus 40 gives you 60, which is, you've got 60 years till you get to 100. So basically to calculate how many years left to 100, you need to take 100 minus your age. Hopefully that makes sense. So I need a variable. It's a, what do we call this variable? It's how many years you are until you're 100. I can't think of a better thing to call it, so I'm going to call it years to 100 equals 100 minus age. Okay. Notice the variable names here. You can't have spaces in variable names, obviously, because it would look like two separate variables. So generally, if we want to use spaces, use an underscore. It's all lowercase. Another good thing about variable names. Out of interest, variable names can't start with a numeric digit, but they can contain numeric digits. And we use, by convention, lowercase alphabet for variables. So this should do our 100 minus our age and put it into a new variable called years to 100. And then I can say something like print so name you will be 100 in, now I've got to use the variable name years to 100, and then I want to print the actual word years. Okay, so that should print the text. So then the variable name, which we concatenated up here, you will be 100 in, and then the variable years to 100 years. Wow, let's see if that works. So first name is A. First name is A, second name is B. Welcome AB. How old are you? I'm going to be 40 now, and now you'll notice this is a different kind of error. It's not a syntax error because it's not come up and telling me a syntax error. If I look back at the thing, there's no kind of red mark here telling me where the problem is. This is a runtime error. Something's gone wrong as the program has been running. Now you'll get these quite often. This is part of programming, and learning how to deal with them is a really important part of programming. Generally they can be quite long as we look at more complicated programs, and you tend to be interested in the last few lines of the code. First of all, the last few lines will tell you where the error is. It's in line 10 in our module, and it's this command here, years to 100 equals 100 minus age. And then this will seem like gobbledygook initially, but as you learn more and more about Python, you're looking for some key words in error in here to see where the errors are, and it's saying it's an unsupported operand type for int and str. So it's something that we're trying to do unsupported with integers, ints, and strings. Okay. Now you either know this or you don't. This is kind of one of the first lessons that you come across in Python. What's actually gone wrong here is when we've typed in our age, we've used this input function here and it's returned our value into age, and then we've been able to print it. That bit worked because it did say you are 40. However, a bit further down we then tried to do 100 minus age, and you can see if we click in that line there in the editor down here at the bottom right, it's line 10. So it's actually this command here, it's gone wrong. And what's happened is age is not actually an integer age, it's not a numeric variable, a numeric value, it's actually a string. Remember we said input always returns strings. So age at the moment is actually a string, not the actual value. And we were trying to do 100 take away, a numeric operation, a string, and it doesn't make sense. You can't take 100 minus some random sets of characters. So what's happened is it's failed at this point. So how do we solve this? Well, you'll do this many times. Whenever we want to input a value, after the input function has returned it, here it's stored as a string, we need to convert it into an integer. So what we're going to do is we're going to say age equals, or is assigned, very bad of me there, int age. So what's going on here? Well, remember, int, what is it? It's a function because it's got parentheses after it. What are we sending to the function? We're sending age. And at this point in time, age is a string. So it sends age as a string to the int function. The int function, surprisingly enough, converts things to integers. It now returns from the int function the value of age as a numeric variable, an integer, and assigns it to back to the variable called age. So age now is even though it's got the same label, it's actually now containing a numeric variable. So here when we print it, we print you are age, and print works very well whether this is a string or a numeric variable. It takes care of that for you. And then here when we do the sum, hopefully this now will be a numeric variable. So let's run that and see if it happens. So I'm just get the thing there. So John Jones. How old am I? I'm going to be 45 today. So what's your first name? It went a bit wrong there, didn't it, when we were trying to type in our first name? So what's your first name? John Jones you will be. Something went wrong as we ran it. I think the cursor was in the wrong place or something. So we do get that from time to time. Let's just run that again. Run module. There we go. Our cursor is now in the right place. Maybe I didn't have the window in focus or something. So John, you can tell I'm not used to this keyboard. John Jones, how old am I? 45. So John Jones, you will be 100 in 55 years. Well, hey, our mathematics has worked. So it's quite a simple program. It's got us looking at how to use a print function. It's got us how to look at using the input function, also where we can actually put some text in the input function and get that displayed. It's got us to understand a little bit about variables. That obviously fname and sname are strings. It's got us to understand we can concatenate strings together, and if we've got a string here which is actually a numeric string, whatever we've typed in numbers, we now know we can convert it using this function called int into an integer function, integer now called age, and then we can start doing some maths with it. The last bit, just to show you, because it will catch you out from time to time, if I just print some information for you. Because obviously it's quite small, this program, we've been able to keep track of what's going on, but just to show you how we can find out what a variable is, what we're going to do is just print. So let's have a look at the variables that we've got here. We've obviously got name, so I'm going to print the text name, spell it right. Name is of type, comma, and we're going to use another function called type and ask for the type of name. So just to clarify what's going on here, we're using a function called type. Why is it a function? It's got parentheses after it. We're giving it the variable name and we're asking it to return what type of a variable name is. What it returns comes back to this point in the code, which then is part of a print statement, so it should print the text name is of type and then a space and then whatever this function returns. So we'll see that this is a string. If we have a look at age, however, so I'm just going to take that one. I'm going to take age. Age is of type age, so let's just run that. So I'm going to be Bill Jones now. I'm going to be 12. So yeah, that's all worked. And my information field is name is of type a class string. So name is containing strings, strs, whereas age is of type int. Now notice, if we'd done what type age was at this point in our code, age would have been a string variable, but here we've converted it to an int, so it's now an int variable, which is what we print down here. So just bear that in mind. So that's the basics of the code. Let's just go through and make sure we've got all the salient points of this, so that you're quite happy, and make a note of some of the little bits really. So clever things that Python does. Here we've used a plus sign and it's been concatenation, it's added these strings together. Here we used a minus sign and it was a subtraction. If we'd used an addition down here, it would have been a numeric addition. So what's going on there? Well, Python's really clever. If we use a plus sign and we've got strings either side, it knows to concatenate them. If we've got numeric signs and we've got integers either side, so we've got mathematical symbols and integers either side, it knows to do mathematical operations, which is quite clever really. Think about it. It's a neat function of Python. For those interested, it's what we call operator overloading. It's things that people don't tend to think about when it's quite neat in Python. Other things to note as we're kind of getting going is, remember, and I'm very bad at it, I keep saying equals here, but this single equals is an assignment statement. Make sure you remember that, and if you can try and teach or remember as you're using it to think it's an assignment statement, it'll save you getting confused later on. We've been using variables. Variables are just containers, and remember, variables can't contain spaces, they can't start with a letter, and convention says they should be in lowercase. So that's it. Hopefully that made sense, and you can watch this recording. What I'd recommend you do is have a go typing this in, make some errors, play around with it, and have a look at the extensions and the questions that are available online. Thanks very much.